Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, The Most Pressing Talent Needs of the Life Science Industry, Highlights from the 2018 CSBI National Workforce Trends Report. This webinar is part of an ongoing webinar series on careers in bioscience produced by BioCT in partnership with the University of Connecticut Center for Career Development. My name is Kelsey Keefe, and I'm a career consultant at the UConn Center for Career Development. I am also here with my colleague, Lisa. Hello. Lisa is here to help me manage the webinar and the questions you submit. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. You should see your attendee interface on your computer desktop in the upper right-hand corner. If you're listening in using your computer speaker system by default, but if you would prefer to join over the phone, just select telephone in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenters by typing your questions into the questions pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect these and address them during the question and answer session at the end of the presentation. Note that today's presentation is being recorded and will be provided within 48 hours. I would now like to introduce Dawn, President and CEO of BioCT. She will introduce our guest presenters for today.
Hello, everyone. I am Dawn Hocevar, President and CEO of BioCT. BioCT is Connecticut's voice for the bioscience industry in the state. We work with all aspects of the ecosystem to assist with collaboration between government, academia, and industry to create, grow, and retain talent and companies in Connecticut. This monthly webinar series is focused on careers in the industry, the types of jobs needed, and personal stories on career paths and the skills needed. Please check BioCT's career portal for jobs and recordings of these webinars, and sign up for the BioCT news alerts to stay on top of the industry activity. You can see all of this at bioct.org. Our guest speaker presenters for today's webinar are Lisa Bosnitich and Lori Lindberg. Lisa is the Executive Director of the Biocom Institute in San Diego. The Institute's focus is on STEM education and workforce development for the life science industry. Lisa currently chairs the Coalition of State Bioscience Institute, CSBI, which is a 42-state coalition dedicated to developing and scaling successful industry practices in the life science education, entrepreneurship, and career development. CSBI produces the biennial National Life Science Workforce Report that she and Lori Lindberg will present on today. Lori is the president and CEO of the California Life Science Institute, or CLSI, overseeing the Institute's entrepreneurship, education, and workforce development initiatives. She is also co-founder and chair emeritus of CSBI, and with Lisa, chairs the CSBI Workforce Development Committee. Thank you, Lisa and Lori, for joining us today.
Okay. Thank you for the introduction, Dawn, and to BioCT and the University of Connecticut Center for Career Advancement for hosting this webinar and allowing us to share some of the results of our 2018 report. This is Lori Lindberg, and before launching into the findings of the 2018 report, I'd like to give a bit of background into the founding of the Coalition of State Bioscience Institutes, or CSBI, and the rationale behind developing the report. Back in 2012, I and several of my counterparts across the country came together with the common goal to share best practices that would help us expand industry-led life science education, workforce development, and entrepreneurship programs through a nationally coordinated effort. We created CSBI as a sister coalition of the Council of State Bioscience Associations, or CSBA, a national network of life science industry associations who come together under the umbrella of the National Biotechnology Innovation Organization, or BIO. One of the first tasks we in the CSBI's Workforce Development Committee set out to address was a leading concern that we heard year after year, cited year after year by life science CEOs in annual surveys, and that is finding the right talent to drive innovation and success in their organizations. It's also a leading question that all of us continually encountered from academic partners and public officials who wanted to know where the leading occupations in the field are, and occupations and skill sets, and where they're anticipated to be. But until we developed this report, we had been forced to rely on 2-year-old labor market data, which for our industry, which is characterized by rapid technological advancement and significant churn, wasn't really helpful to us. So we set out to capture data in real time, as Lisa will show later. All of the interviews and surveys that we conducted for the report were collected within 6 months of production, which we launched this last June at BIO. And all of the data from the job board postings were collected from the full year prior to the report. So not only is the data very current, but because we're actually having conversations with leading life science employers, we also capture some of the nuances that aren't available in traditional data sets. Lastly, I'll add that no one has tried to collect this data uniformly across the states. To date, it's been a largely voluntary effort by Lisa, myself, and other CSBI member states, but we hope to continue to grow participation in the coming years so that we can really begin to define in some detail some of the regional themes and variations. So with that, I will turn it over to Lisa to introduce the 2018 report.
Thanks, Lori. So I'll just start by referring to a couple data points that we pull from the Techonomy Bio Report, Investment, Innovation, and Job Creation in a Growing U.S. Bioscience Industry. This is a report that was released in June of 2018. And what it tells us is that between 2014 and 2016, the number of companies in the United States increased from 77,000 to 85,000 when you look at the life science sector. And the number of people employed in the industry went up from 1.66 million to 1.74 million. So there's a lot of growth. This is a very strong industry sector, and workforce challenges are kind of a hot button item for these companies. And so, you know, as Lori mentioned, that's why this report is so important, and the timeliness of the data included in it makes it that much more relevant. So drilling down into the data just a little bit, you can see that we had inclusive of over 135 executive interviews.
My apologies, I'm not able to advance the slide. There we
Perfect.
go.
There we go. So roughly between January and April of this year, we conducted over 135 interviews with executives from life science companies. And we did, we received over 350 survey response completions from HR and hiring managers. And between January and December of 2017, we looked at over 53,000 job postings to glean the data that was released in this report. And just to give you an idea, because we'll be sharing some highlights of the report. You can find the full report online. And today we'll be talking about the 5 key themes that we distilled from those executive interviews. But I wanted to give you an idea of some of the things that we asked for in the surveys we did of the hiring managers. Because as you'll note, we won't report on all of that today, but again, you can find that information online. So we've asked them what positions they've hired in the past 12 months, what positions are hardest to fill, how they source their talent, how many H-1B visa employees and contract workers they employ, what their internship programs are like, and their anticipated demand, hiring demand over the upcoming 12 months. And again, this report was just released earlier this year in June at the Bio International Convention. So if we look at the next slide, you'll note that, yep, great. You'll note that similar trends can be seen when looking at both the total life science job postings, so that's the graph at the top. So if this is looking at the life science industry sector, all jobs posted between 2010 and 2017, and the similarities between those and the technical positions over that same period. And so what we do is we use the SOC codes to determine how we pull those technical positions, and we look at those very specifically for this report. So you notice there's an upward trend of postings from 2010 to 2015. And 2017 postings, while lower than 15 and 16, remain higher in both instances than any year from 2010 to 2014. So again, supporting the data that was released in that taxonomy report that I referred to earlier. On the next slide, we're looking at, and this is a, oh, can we go back? There we go. This is a 2-year look, so 2016 and 17, of the minimum degree requirements for the technical job postings. And again, those are the technical jobs only. And this tells us that bachelor's degree candidates remained the most sought after at 62%. But it's worth noting that almost 23% of postings for the technical jobs were available to individuals with less than a bachelor's degree. Obviously, this is of great interest to our community college partners, and we continue to hear rumblings about the benefits for the students and the companies to create more pathways for students with high school diplomas to enter the life science workforce. Also included in the report are the top jobs based on the job postings in 2017, and once again, lab technicians top the list. We've seen this in all prior reports since we've started doing this work. But if you combine the quality positions, so you'll note you've got quality control analyst and the rate and quality inspector technician, you'll note that they place a high third on that list when they're combined. And this is important because we've got more data on that quality and regulatory, those quality and regulatory positions throughout this report as well. So when you look at, so this chart looks at skill clusters by degree, and skill clusters are a grouping of skills necessary for a particular process. So for this, we looked at the technical job postings over a 2-year period, again, 2016 and 17. And we can tell from this chart that the top skill clusters for positions requiring an associate's or bachelor's degree are laboratory research, quality assurance, and control and manufacturing processes. So you'll see quality shows up again here in the top skill clusters chart as well. And this is going to be a common theme that we'll notice throughout the report. Here, I'm going to turn it over to Lori to go through the 5 key trends.
Thanks, Lisa. So our CSBI members spoke with over 135 life science executives across the country, from which we drew the following 5 key trends that are impacting their talent, their current and anticipated talent needs. Beginning with trend 1, we're seeing an explosion of technological innovations like CRISPR, CAR-T, and breakthroughs in fields such as computational biology, which is creating the need for expertise in a broad range of cutting-edge technologies, including data analytics, 3D printing, AI, next-gen sequencing, process integration, analytic chemistry, and CAD design, just to name a few. At the same time, evolving business models and a wave of external forces, such as rapid change and competition in global markets and evolving regulatory environments, are creating demand for new types of operational and business expertise, as well as the ability to navigate new regulatory and reimbursement complexities. Come on, slide. Do I have control of the slides, or it's not moving? Okay, thank you. As in our 2016 report, we heard a lot about the impact of the rapid changes in the healthcare industry, particularly with implementation of the Affordable Care Act, and how companies are responding by shifting from a fee-for-service model to a model more based on value and risk sharing. This means that companies are looking for people who can navigate the complex healthcare system, who have regulatory expertise and understand reimbursement, and who can manage relationships and business partnerships. As you heard from Lisa, with some of the data around quality positions are in high demand. It bears mentioning because so many executives raised this, even more so than in our 2016 report, that they have real concern that the national discourse on drug affordability, drug pricing is adding to their recruitment challenges. So moving on to the next slide. Our second trend, as we have heard every year since launching this report in 2013, while the demand for new technical skills is very real, executives continue to point to soft skills as critical for career and business success. So as companies' needs evolve and change, they are seeking nimble, flexible, adaptive, resilient employees who are comfortable working with ambiguity, who have the ability to work in matrix or virtual work environments, people with strong communication skills who can work well with others, people with fire in their bellies, energy, passion, integrity, employees who appreciate the big picture, individuals who understand how to lead, persuade, and make decisions. All of this is highly valued, and what they really want, but cite difficulty finding, are people who possess these soft skills and who come from hybrid backgrounds, such as science and business or engineering and IT. Moving on to trend 3, the next slide. Thank you. Trend 3 pertains to some of the differences we found in different regions in the country. Not surprisingly, perhaps, life science companies in emerging and more established clusters face very different sets of challenges. Employers in emerging clusters spoke at length about the lack of available skilled local talent to help them build and expand their companies. Over time, as anchor companies begin to take root, they expect more robust local talent pools to emerge. But for the time being, most are recruiting from other states or abroad for qualified, experienced job candidates, particularly for mid-level management and executive talent. Next slide. Oops, sorry. Okay, in contrast, companies in more established clusters, such as in California, have rich local talent pools, but are struggling to attract and retain new talent as a consequence of infrastructure and affordability challenges. Also here, and increasingly in other regions where tech is taking root, we're seeing an increasing overlap and convergence between the tech and life science industries with the adoption of technology into life science products, services, and operations. So this is creating both new opportunities and corresponding skill needs but also competition for talent. Life science companies are seeking people who can work at the interface of the two industries and who can think in new ways about global markets, sectors, and customer experiences. But they're finding that it's much easier for tech to recruit life science talent than vice versa. Many tech employees are just not as comfortable working in the regulated life science industry with its long product development cycles and low tolerance for risk. Lisa, back to you.
Yeah, so in spite of these regional challenges, companies have the need to add employees, right? And so of the 354 companies surveyed, 94% of them reported hiring in the past 12 months. If you switch to the next slide, this is a breakdown of that hiring by industry sector. For those 354 companies, the smallest bar at the top of each sector represents companies that did not hire at all, and it doesn't top 5% in any one sector. So if you look down the list, the life science industry is made up of bioscience-related distribution, drugs and pharmaceuticals, industrial biotech, medical devices, equipment, research testing and medical laboratories, and this other category. And in all of those cases, almost every company is reporting hiring. The different bars represent a range in terms of number of hires made over the past 12 months. So there's 1 to 5 hires, 6 to 10, 11 to 25, and greater than 50. And as you can see, hiring is strong across all those ranges. On the next slide, when we surveyed companies about how difficult it's been to hire for those positions, so 94% of the companies are adding, and we asked about, forward 2 slides, please.
It's not responding. Sorry, there, whoops.
So when we get there, you'll note that 78% of our respondents reported that they were able to fill positions within 4 months, and 42% of those within 9 weeks or less. But consistent with our interviews and trends, the HR and hiring managers told us that the 2 functional areas in which they have a more difficult or much more difficult time filling positions are regulatory affairs and compliance and quality. So, those are the most in-demand positions, and they're also the most difficult to fill. In the next slide, this is looking forward to the next 12 months. Once we're able to advance there we go. And the need to hire these same difficult positions is still high, right? So research and development is at the top, but then right underneath that, we've got quality and regulatory affairs also made the list of positions that will need to be filled in the next 12 months. So we'll switch back to the trends here, and I'll turn it back over to Lori.
Thank you, Lisa. Our 4th trend, what we heard, that diversity was an important topic in all of these conversations. That said, we learned that executives have very diverse approaches to diversity and also varying views on its importance for their companies. Most of those we spoke to, though certainly not all, recognize the benefits of diversity and the value of having diverse views around the table to innovate and compete in discrete and global markets. Many stressed that it's really the diversity of experience and thinking that is critical. It's not helpful, for instance, to have a lot of employees from the same academic institution. Whoops. Sorry about the slide advancement, it's a little sticky. Some have formal diversity and inclusion initiatives to help recruit and retain diverse teams. Some say it happens organically simply by hiring the best local or international talent. Gender diversity was frequently cited, such as initiatives to groom women for advancement or training programs to prepare women leaders for industry boards. Because so many organizations are seeking to do the same thing, however, they're finding it very competitive to find senior women candidates. I'll add that none of these companies reported being fully satisfied with their current level of diversity, particularly when moving up in the organization. In some of the emerging clusters, some say that the limited local talent pool means that diversity is a luxury they cannot afford. Others say this same lack of local talent forces them to hire internationally, thus creating de facto diverse organizations. Finally, our fifth trend, as we find every year, many companies are addressing current and anticipated talent needs through partnerships with academic institutions at varying levels. They often locate their R&D operations within proximity to academic partners to co-develop technologies. But several are also engaging with school science programs through internships, co-operations, and other creative collaborations to provide exposure and experience to students and to develop a pipeline of skilled employees. Come on. Oops, all right, there we go. Of course, one of the best, though certainly not the only ways that industry can partner with academic programs is through internships, which can inspire an early appreciation in the life sciences among young people, provide invaluable industry experience for students in technical fields and increasingly for students in business and non-technical fields. It's also a great way for industry and students to test drive or evaluate fit. And we hear often that many interns do end up becoming employees. In spite of this, several companies remain reluctant to take interns out of concerns for experience, time investment, capacity, liability issues, and more. One thing we heard quite a bit about in emerging clusters in particular is the value of certification programs for building the skills for their incumbent employees in areas, as you can see from this quote, such as quality assurance, critical thinking, statistics, technical writing, and business skills. So many companies, as you heard from Lisa, are also addressing some of their talent needs through H-1B visa holders and contract workers, but most agree that it's critical to develop the next generation of talent. Yet many of them continue to point to the weak talent pipeline, in part because, number one, so many young people, particularly those who are underrepresented in STEM careers, are simply unaware of the vast and rewarding careers in the industry. But also, and we hear this year after year, because of the lack of student preparedness among four-year graduates who are not getting enough hands-on, industry-relevant experience and soft skill training, and graduate programs whose focus is on developing talent for an increasingly small number of academic positions rather than for high demand careers in the industry. So as soon as I advance, I will turn it back to Lisa. Whoops, for our recommendations. There we go.
There we go. So, it's one thing to produce a report, but with a well-trained workforce being such a critical factor to life science company success, the call to action and recommendation section is really the most important, right? So we've got stakeholders across the board, the industry companies, our academic partners, the trade associations and institutes that make up the CSBI, as well as public officials, right? And so there's ways for all of these groups to engage and help address this gap and make sure that we've got the right talent for this industry. And so we've identified 6 here, and I'll just walk through them. Obviously, designing partnerships in ways that allow students and postdocs to gain working exposure to industry partners and culture. That work-based learning experience at all levels for students is really critical in not only keeping them engaged in their studies and in their pursuit of life science as a career, but also giving them valuable insights so that they can be competitive for these jobs and really make valuable contributions to the companies once they're hired on. Another recommendation is designing research projects together that require critical thinking and the application of academic knowledge to real-world industry challenges. So that gets at a couple of different points. The soft skill component comes into play there, as well as more of that work-based learning and real problem-based projects that are so critical to developing our students. Then this is a pretty simple one, training students on those soft skills. We've seen examples of academic institutions that are focusing more on soft skills right now. You know, as we mentioned, companies will say time and time again that it's easier to train the technical skills than it is the soft skills. So it's essential that we're getting our students those skills early on. We can go to the next slide. So here, you know, one way to look at how we can do this is regionally, right? So if we can get our industry partners, academic advisory teams to develop strategic roadmaps and get our public officials involved in how this is going to benefit the industry and the economy, we can identify the drivers of that life science innovation and the skills and training needed, and really put together a roadmap to ensure that we're doing this right in all regions across the U.S. Another critical thing is expanding those mentoring programs, particularly for populations that are underrepresented in STEM fields. You know, Lori mentioned that none of the executives that we talked to said that they're happy with the level of diversity that they have in their companies right now. Well, that starts at a very early age. And so to the extent that we can foster that love and ignite that passion for STEM early on and stay with those kids and make sure that they're not, getting disengaged along the way, the better. And so one way to do that is through mentoring programs. And encourage student participation in professional industry associations. So just another way to get students access to professionals, to get more understanding of the workplace, and to give them an edge and a leg up on opportunities to enter the workforce. So I think the last slide there is just a thank you. We've got the link to the report. You can go to the csbioinstitutes.org website and click on the programs and workforce development links. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to either Lori or I. Those are our emails up there on the screen. We're happy to engage with you, and I think I'll turn it back over to Kelsey. Dawn?
Hi, yes. Thank you, Lisa and Lori. We're now going to begin answering the questions submitted during today's presentation. As a reminder, you can still submit questions through the questions pane in your attendee control panel. Lori or Lisa, would you like to field the first question?
Yeah, I'm trying to open up my screen a little bit more, so it's hard.
And I'll read the first question in the meantime.
Okay.
We often hear that it is difficult for students and recent graduates to find positions which do not require advanced degrees. Do you have any ideas on this based on the findings?
Yeah, so this is Lisa. I'll take that one. We do, if you refer back to the one of the earlier slides, we don't have to go there now, but 62% of the job postings that we looked at for the technical jobs required minimum requirement was a bachelor's degree, right? And 23% were available for students with less than a bachelor's degree. But I think what happens is that doesn't take into account the work experience that's also required. So many times companies will list that minimum degree requirement, and paired with that will be a certain amount of work experience. And that's where internships can be so valuable, because there's this conundrum of the entry-level job not being available to a student that has no experience, or a graduate that has no experience. But if they have that internship, that can count. And you'll notice if you go to the full report, 82% of our hiring managers reported regularly offering internships, and college student internships were the most common. And those were regularly offered by 73% of the responding companies. Much less common are internships for graduate students. That was 39%. Community college students were 21%, and high school students 17%. And that's if you go to the full report, that data is on page 25. So hopefully that's helpful there. I do know that we also have some data on where our HR and hiring managers are sourcing their talent. So they're going to the colleges and universities, they're going to the community colleges. Obviously, internal sources is a key one for both entry-level and experienced openings. And internships for entry-level openings are at 47% of our respondents said that they source their talent for entry-level positions through internships and co-ops. And then there's online job boards and recruiters, which are that's a very small percentage of companies that go to job boards and recruiters for those entry-level openings. So again, that's some more data that you can find in the full report.
Okay, I have another question that's a bit related. Question that came in is related to apprenticeships. Do you have any sense that companies are moving in this direction?
So I'll start, and then maybe Lori has something to add. We didn't survey for that in this nationwide report. I do know, just because being based in California, there is some work being done in the apprenticeship space, and right now a lot of that is happening in the food industry, and there's a push to sort of translate some of that into life science apprenticeships as well. And we see it's starting to gain some traction. But again, that's something that we did not survey for. And Lori, I don't know if you have anything to add.
I don't, but it's definitely, and it's something I said to some of the organizers earlier. We refine the questions every year, and if there are things that are really emerging as trends in your region that we could conceivably add into the survey questions or interview questions without turning it into a monster survey, we're certainly open to doing that. And I think that because we are hearing more about apprenticeships, I think that's something that we could consider in the next iteration of the report. I see a question about how these data have been communicated on Capitol Hill, such as with the House Committee on Education and Workforce and its Subcommittee on Education and Workforce Training. So we have not shared our results specifically nationally, except through BIO's workforce, the initiative on diversity, but it's not a bad idea. What we are, several of us do in our own states, and some of us, such as Lisa and I in California, we did a state version of the report, and we are sharing it in a briefing next week. It was disseminated to all of the legislators here in the state, and then for next week, for instance, Lisa and I are doing a briefing, a Biotech 101 with legislators, where we'll be sharing some of the major findings here. A lot of the CSBI members actually share the national report results in committee testimonies within their state legislatures, and have found it to be very helpful. There's a lot in here that needs to be addressed by public officials with industry partners. So.
Another question that came in, did you uncover any stark differences or surprising findings in this report, particularly looking back on prior reports?
I'll take that. I mean, I think many of the trends that we reported on, you know, particularly the convergence with tech, and also just the rapid technological advancements. I mean, we've heard, we've definitely heard about the rapid advancements. We do the report every 2 years, but there's a whole new set of advancements, you know, this year, in the last couple of years, that are that weren't even happening 3 years ago. And so that's just the nature of this industry. We're at such an inflection point where so much change and innovation is happening and requiring the new skill sets. The convergence with tech, we were hearing about that a bit in our last report, but nothing like we heard within the last year, and particularly that competition for talent, and not just the new skill needs. And I think, as we said, as other parts of the country are seeing the tech industry start to take root, it's becoming issues for them as well. I think finally the regional differences that we are beginning to finally note because of increased participation, where I think that the issues that some of the emerging clusters are facing with regard to their difficulty of finding local talent is really important. And then in a much more pronounced way, you know, particularly I would say in my region, Northern California, but in other parts of the state, are just how difficult it is in a high cost of living area to retain and attract that talent. So we actually heard, you know, some of the emerging cluster CEOs talking about their very active efforts to pull some of that talent away from the emerging clusters that are just having or the established clusters that are just so costly to live in. I'd say regionally, surprisingly, the views on the varying views on diversity, you know, being in an area where it's almost taken for granted, if you're a global business, that diversity is really key to innovation. That's not universally held in other parts of the country, and I found that it was just an important revelation.
All right. I think we have time for one more question. So universities and bioscience supporting federal agencies see a difference between education and training, but do the companies see a difference?
Could you repeat the first part of that?
Yeah, universities and bioscience supporting federal agencies see a difference between education and training, but do the companies see a difference between education and training?
I can answer to what I think that means, or I have a thought on that. Sometimes we find where someone with a 4-year degree from a university and a great education goes back to community college to take a class or two to get some very specific skills training in order to make them competitive for the industry. And so that an example of that would be laboratory skills, right, for the technical positions. And I can say that, what we see in California, because we didn't survey for this specifically throughout the United States, so I can't speak to it beyond this region, but that the universities are attempting to be more responsive to workforce needs, and not just training the academics, right? But that is the case, that we do see fair number of people going back to that community college for that skill training. And I think that's what that question is trying to get at. So companies do see a difference, yes.
Great. Thank you. Thank you to Lisa Bazanovic and Lori Lindberg, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar, The Most Pressing Talent Needs of the Life Science Industry, Highlights from the 2018 CSBI National Workforce Trends Report. This webinar is part of an ongoing webinar series on careers in bioscience, produced by BioCT in partnership with the University of Connecticut Center for Career Development. A date for the next webinar in November will be announced shortly. Please check BioCT's event calendar at bioct.org/events. Sign up for BioCT news alert and sign up for BioCT news alerts. The UConn Center for Career Development calendar can also be found at career.uconn.edu/events. And you can check both of those calendars for information about upcoming webinars in this series. Once you leave today's webinar, you'll receive a survey on the presentation, and we would appreciate it if you could complete that and provide your feedback. You will also receive a follow-up email within 48 hours with a link to view a recording of today's webinar. We will also be hosting that video on BioCT's, CSBI's, and UConn CCD's website. On behalf of BioCT and the UConn Center for Career Development and our presenters, thank you for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.